As you can see in this comic, there is two boats, but each boat shows a very different story. On the left here, this boat is meant to represent inner city schools. They're packed, they're near sinking, going under, and it's just a mess. They're not funded properly. And on the right is supposed to represent the rich suburban schools, where you have basically a battleship and a really nice boat that has space for everybody and can withstand itself and will continue to withstand itself throughout the years. So this is a good representation of the article that I read by Rachel Ostrander, which explains the inequality in school funding. And she gives us two reasons as to why schools are funded unequally. And that is actually due to the two main factors of how schools are funded. About 45% of all school funding comes from local property tax, and about 43% comes from state funding. And so then she goes on to explain the reasons why these two funding methods are counterproductive. So the first method of funding comes from local property tax, like I said. So if you live in a low-income area, that means that you are going to have not as nice houses, which obviously leads to less property tax on those houses. Obviously, you can see in the cycle that it just leads to less funding for schools, lower quality in your education, which then derives students that are not as well educated for the workforce, thus getting lower paying jobs, ending up right back into those low income areas. So she says that this cycle is counterproductive because schools that are in a district that get little funding are never going to come out of that, because they're not just going to demolish an entire bad neighborhood, if you want to call it, and put in really nice houses. It's just not going to happen. So she says that schools are doomed from the start based on the houses that are already in their school district. Now, since schools are quote unquote stuck with the property tax values that they have, schools look to obtain more money through the state, which leads me to the second way that schools are funded, which is state taxes. And now, in recent years, states have been funded based on standardized tests due to Common Core, No Child Left Behind, those kinds of principles. And she explains how this method is also counterproductive for funding schools, because she says that urban schools or inner city schools are less likely to do well on these standardized tests due to culture barriers, language barriers, and other factors such as, in the first, less funding to teach the students properly. So as you can see in the picture, obviously that is not a fair selection. You have a monkey that could easily climb the tree, you have a bird that could fly up into the tree. It's just not fair that she puts it. It's very counterproductive. The schools that score lower on the tests obviously are the ones that need more help, yet they receive less funds. Whereas vice versa, the schools that do well on the tests, that already have adequate funding, do well on the tests and therefore get more money. So that is just, she explains it as a negative cycle, whereas it's a repeating cycle that nobody wants to step in and change. And she says that the only way that we can change this system is if a group of people, so that's all of you, people who want to rise to the occasion. I guess that's kind of why this is important, is because it's not just some senator talking in Congress saying, hey, we need to change this system. It's everybody needs to get together and show this is why the system is flawed and this is how we can change the system. And then she explains right at the end, her best thought of changing the system is everybody banding together and making it law of putting one person or one group of people in charge of how the school is funded, instead of some funded by the state, some funded by property tax. Basically, we are splitting the responsibility, therefore not being able to hold one group accountable. So she says the best way to combat this is to hold one group accountable. Thank you.